Good morning. I'd like to call to order the meeting of County Commissioners for December 2021. What's customary, we usually do the prayer and the pledge. And I'm going to ask if Marine Corps League Detachment 1236 of Johnston County will come in and lead us in the pledge. And I'm going to ask Mr. Patrick Harris if he'll lead us in the prayer. Thank you.
Let us pray together. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we pause this morning to give thanks to the many blessings that you bring to each one of us. Father, we thank you for the opportunity to wake up in the greatest land, the greatest nation in the world. Lord, we thank you for the blessings you bring to this county. Father, we ask you to bless our meeting and watch over us. Father, help us to make good decisions that benefit our people, that will be in fair and honest and good for all. Father, we thank you for the amazing opportunities that you've brought to us. Lord, watch over our first responders and our soldiers. Keep them safe, Lord, and return them safely to their families when their duty is done. We ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Hey, just real quickly, I want to remind you of December the 7th, reflect back on Pearl Harbor, and also during this season, every child deserves a little Christmas with Toys for Tots. Stand by, detail, check, present, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let's go. Carry on.
Thank you.
To begin with, I'd like to welcome our newest commissioner, Mr. Dickie Braswell, and thank him for being a part of this board and showing that he wanted to be a part of this board. And I just welcome you, and I wish nothing but your success, because if you succeed, Johnston County succeeds.
I can see it's going to be a challenge, and I think I'm up to it. One thing that, in noticing things here, we get a reconciliation statement every month from our staff, and it gives us on our water and sewer usage and where we stand. I'd like a little more information on that when we get it. Maybe in the future I'd be happy to get with Chandra and whoever I need to get with and tell them what I really, so I can analyze these things more thoroughly and understand better where our water and sewer problems are, maybe. So that'll be one of my strong areas of interest. So that's why you're here.
I like a man who in the first minute gets right down.
Don't need to wait around.
Yeah, and as with our staff, with water and sewer, with anything else, just if you need some help, ask them for help. I mean, they've been nothing but professional and gracious and knowledgeable on any question I've ever had of them.
And I have tremendous respect for them. I've worked interaction with them all for many, many years.
Good. Now moving on, it's December. We get to decide the organization of this board, and I'm going to ask County Manager Mr. Rick Hester if he'd take over the meeting.
Thank you, sir. As Vice Chairman Wood said, that this time of year is the organization of the board, and at this time I'd like to open the nominations for chairman.
I'd like to nominate Commissioner Butch Lauder for the position of Chairman of the Board of Commissioners.
Second.
Sir. Okay, any other nominations? Okay, we'll close the nominations, and by acclamation, congratulations, Chairman Lauder.
Thank you. Thank you. Here. Adjustment here. And if I could take just 1 second to thank 3 years ago the people of Johnston County for trusting me to sit on this board, and thank this board for trusting me to set its chair. Sorry, they all look the same back here. And this morning is kind of, I was riding in thinking about things on the way in. You know, this is a great honor that comes with a lot of responsibility. And fortunately, I have a great team to work with. We have a lot on our plate in the coming year, a lot of plans that we're bringing to fruition, a lot of decisions to be made for the future of Johnston County. So I did want to do that. I also wanted to thank my wife and my pastor for coming out today, and my other family who is watching. Have a grandson in a play at 11, but I do want to thank everyone and look forward to serving the citizens of Johnston County. With that, thank you, sir. Thank you. And with that, I would like to open the floor for nominations.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to say a couple things
Okay.
aside, plus the nomination, but welcome, and we thank you for stepping forward to serve. I think anybody on this board could serve as vice chairman, but I think as we go into this coming year, it's going to be an even number year, and we're probably going to be facing a bond issue, which means we're going to have to go before the local government commission. And I've been there several times. And one of the things in dealing with them and our bond rating agencies is they look at the makeup of the board, the leadership of the board, the experience and the types of experience that have had. And towards that end, with that in mind, I nominate Tony Braswell as vice chairman.
Any other nominations?
Which Mr. Golan, I believe with what he said that is true, but I also agree with what else he said, that anybody on this board could be vice chair and make a good vice chair.
Yep.
And knowing the bonds coming up and knowing how good a shape Johnston County is in financially, you know, and I know I hate to get off on a tangent, but some of the bond stuff and interest rates and our credit rating has to do with things that are sometimes out of our control, whether it be the average annual salary of Johnston County or the makeup of Johnston County or this, that, and the other. But if it be appropriate, I'd like to nominate Mr. Patrick Harris for vice chair.
Okay. Duly noted. Any other nominations for vice chair? If not, I'll close the nominations, and I would seek first a vote on Patrick Harris. All those in favor of Mr. Harris as vice chair, if you would please raise your hand. All right, Mr. Harris, looks like you have 5 votes, and welcome to the vice chairmanship. Look forward to us working together, and we'll do one more
Congratulations.
seat swap. I think we'll be ready to get on. Oh, take your nameplate. Yeah, let's not.
Take that with me.
Yeah, take your nameplates with you. And I will say, while they're moving around, a lot of times we have people come up to the front who talk about being nervous, and so and sitting over there's a little bit different perspective now that you're sitting in the middle, or I'm sitting in the middle. It's a little bit different perspective. So if you see me looking down, following some great notes here, or maybe wiping my brow, it might be because there's a little case of nerves, but we're gonna get all that work through, and we're gonna make it through. So,
Mr. Chairman,
yes, sir.
I'd like to congratulate Commissioner Harris. I asked people not to read anything into this that is not really not what it is. We as commissioners, we have an election, and that's it. And so, congratulations, and any way that I can help in the future, I'll certainly be glad to do that.
Process works.
Process works,
That's
right.
That's right.
And thank you, Commissioner Godwin, for, nominating me, but again, don't read anything else into what this is, okay?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to add, I appreciate the vote of confidence from the board to act as your vice chair, and Mr. Braswell, I appreciate those kind comments. And the beauty of this is we all work together as a team, and that's what really matters at the end of the day. And so I'm humbled by the opportunity, and I'm thankful for that, and I will do my very best to carry out the duties of the vice chair, and I will kick the chairman under the table if I need to. No.
No, that's okay. I'm sure to come from this side, too.
Between Mr. Bradwell and I, we'll help keep things moving. But
You don't have to, we'll tell him when he runs in the ditch.
But I appreciate the opportunity. Thank y'all so much.
With that, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, approval or discussion of the agenda. Any adjustments to the agenda?
Mr. Chairman, I move the agenda be approved as stated.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Agenda is approved. Next, we move on to the consent agenda items. We have 5 items on the consent agenda. Approval of our November meeting, November 1 meeting, some additions to the DOT, streets, adoption.
Motion, we approve those, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. All in favor of the motion? Aye. Thank you. And now we have an update from our health director, Dr. Marilyn Pearson, on the COVID-19.
Well, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
I hope everybody had a safe and healthy Thanksgiving. I provided with you the information, the update for today with our numbers. And you can see our cases are at over 33,000. We have seen an increase in our cases in the last week or so. Our hospitalizations have decreased a bit to 21, and we're at 355 deaths lost in our residents. We are seeing some reinfections, not as many, but more breakthrough infections. That's those who have been vaccinated and are now becoming positive. So that's at about 4% of our total cases at this point. When we look at our community transmission indicators, we look at the case rate, positivity rate, vaccination rate, and our hospital capacity. So our case rate, I can tell you just last week, a couple of days, we were in the orange. We had gone down to under 100 per 100,000. We're back up to the red again, 173 per 100,000 at this point. So, I mean, that does reflect what we're seeing. A few weeks ago, we were getting maybe 20, 30 cases a day. We're now at 70 or 80 a day at this point. Our positivity rate, the 7-day positivity rate is at 6.8%. And our vaccination rate for our population, about half of our population is fully vaccinated at this point. So those numbers are going up. They're going up slowly. We're seeing more people come in for vaccine, but it's mostly booster vaccine, not as many people coming in for first dose vaccine. Our hospital is full, but not as many COVID patients. So they do have some hospital capacity. And at this point, we're dealing with 3 clusters. We have no outbreaks. And those outbreaks, again, would be in long-term care facilities or jail facilities, 2 or more cases. So we don't have any outbreaks that we're addressing at this point. We continue to offer testing with our partner at the Men's Club, and vaccines we still offer at our health department. To provide you an update with monoclonal antibody therapy, we partnered with FEMA with a site that was in our parking lot. That ended on November 29th, but they provided 549 individuals with treatment there over an 11-week period. So, we could see the difference in some of our hospitalizations there because it decreased people getting worse and going to the hospital there. We still have the opportunity for antibody therapy through our hospital, and the number is 919-938-7749. So if people test positive or at high risk and need to get monoclonal antibody therapy, they can call that number to see if they're eligible. And our hospital is providing that treatment right now. Vaccination-wise, your health department staff and partners have provided over 62,000 doses of vaccine since we've started, which is great. Last week, we saw an increase in those numbers. We were averaging at about 100 a day, but last week we gave 837 doses of vaccine, and on Friday it was 251. So more people are coming in. That's good. Everybody's trying to get ready for the holidays to try to protect those who are vulnerable, so that's great. The highest demand we're seeing is in the Moderna booster, just to give you an idea there. Starting this Wednesday, we are partnering with OptumServe, one of our state vendors, to provide vaccine at that unit that was being used for monoclonal antibody therapy. They're going to be providing vaccine, Pfizer and Moderna, there at that unit for us so that we can have time to do some of the other things we're doing at the health department. So Wednesdays and Saturdays, they're going to be there. So Wednesdays are 10 to 6, and Saturdays are 9 to 4. More information will be coming out to provide you all that information. So I know everybody's heard about the Omicron variant and what's happening there. We have a number of our states here, probably about a third now, have found the Omicron variant. North Carolina has not. They are sequencing, but not every positive case is sequenced in North Carolina. Maybe 10, 15, maybe 20% of them are sequenced. And right now, still about 99% of what they're seeing is Delta. We do expect that Omicron is probably in our state. They've just not seen it sequenced yet there. At best, you know, there's a lot of information we're still looking for and trying to get more information there. It is more likely, they're thought, to lead to more reinfections, this Omicron variant, but there's still more data trying to be gathered about hospitalizations and deaths. So again, I continue to encourage everybody, if you can, to do those things that we've always talked about. If you can get vaccinated, please get vaccinated. Anybody who's able, willing, and eligible, please get vaccinated. That will protect yourself and those around you. And again, the vaccine, nothing is 100%, just like flu vaccine, which I do encourage, by the way, please get your flu vaccine. But it does prevent you from getting hospitalized or getting very sick. That's my report for today.
I have a question, Doctor.
Yes.
The breakthrough, towards what you were just talking about, the vaccines, breakthrough infections, can you see a demonstrably difference in those that are infected that have had the shots and those that haven't?
Yeah, those people are not as sick. Most of them are not ending up in the hospital.
Okay.
So the vaccine does help protect you some.
Dr. Pearson,
Yes.
have you seen many cases of the flu this year?
Not as many. We're starting to see an uptick a bit in flu, but we're not seeing as many cases. Just as last year, we didn't see much flu at all. But the concern is that, of course, we didn't see much flu last year, and people weren't out and about as much last year. So we know that people are going to be more exposed. There are all these respiratory viruses out there. So as much protection as possible you can get is what you need to do. So please get the flu vaccine in addition to the COVID vaccine.
Let me ask you a dumb question. Is it possible to get both
Yes, sir. And
at
last
the same time?
Yes. Yes, last year we did see that.
You did see that?
Yes, sir.
The variant that's being discussed now, is that similar to how the flu will have a different strain of flu the next, will it kind of continue, will that continue after that? So it'll be more of that to come?
We anticipate, yes, sir, that will happen, that it'll continue to mutate. We expect that, you know, COVID virus will be with us moving forward. As I mentioned, I think at one of our previous meetings, we hope that it will get to a point where it's more endemic and we don't see as much death and hospitalizations with it. But yes, we expect that it'll continue to mutate. Maybe it'll mutate itself away so that we don't get as much sickness, but yes.
Okay, thank you.
Doctor, the monoclonal antibodies, what kind of participation rate or what kind of numbers are we seeing as folks do that, and what kind of success are we having?
So, as I mentioned, the 11 weeks that the FEMA site was there, they provided over 500 individuals with treatment. And I can tell you, prior to that, we have been looking at the treatments that the hospital have been giving. So a few months before that, and I don't have the data for this month, but there were over 1,200 doses given and only less than 5 had been hospitalized. That's how low it was. So it really does work very well. And as I mentioned, the hospital is now continuing to provide that for those who need it.
Thank you.
Under what circumstances would you not be eligible for that?
It has to be within 10 days of a positive test. There's certain conditions that you are not eligible.
Pre-existing?
Yes. Well, if you're pre-existing conditions, you're at higher risk, so you are eligible. But if you have had reactions to any component previously, but it must be within 10 days, 12 and over, so you can't be under 12. That's one of the big things. You can't be under 12. And then there are a few other things.
Anything else? I did have two comments really. One was a question. I know some of your help from the National Guard, I think, has gone away, and how have you seen that impact our ability to serve our citizens?
Wonderful. I'm glad you asked that question. And yes, we lost some of our National Guards, but they extended.
Great.
Commissioner Lauder came over and actually visited our EOC, where a number of them are working in our EOC and providing some assistance with our teams, our school team, our business team, our county team, et cetera. We previously had 21, we're down to 14. But they are helping us in our clinic area, so our in-house clinic, but they're also helping in our EOC. So they extended them. We have them at least through February is what I've been told, that group. So that has been a big help for us. We couldn't continue to do what we're doing without them. And as a public health department, we not only provide public health services, we provide primary care services and behavioral health services. So we have to continue to provide those services in addition to this response. And our National Guardsmen have been a great help with that.
Dr. Pearson, I just want to say you have throughout this entire unfortunate situation, you have provided extraordinary leadership for this county, and I'm very grateful for your dedication and that of your staff and all those involved, the law enforcement officers, the first responders, the National Guard, everyone that has come together and worked so diligently to serve the people, and that is really, while it's a bad situation, it's inspiring to see that many people come together to help others. Thank you for your leadership.
Well, thank you. And we couldn't do what we do without all of our partners. I say thank you every day, all the time, because without them, we couldn't do what we do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, I believe we had Chad Mclamb with an update on our emergency rental assistance program.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Just going to give you a quick update on where we are with Yardy and our emergency rental assistance. So far through the first week of December, we have sent out almost $4.2 million to citizens in need in Johnston County. 1.7 of that has come from the work that we did before we hired Yardy, and then we've sent out about $2.5 million with Yardy so far. November, we had around 13 payouts. We pay out every day, business day that we're here. We had about 13 payout days, and we sent out over 1.3 million in November alone. So we're averaging about 100,000 a day going out. So we have about $8.5 million out of the first two buckets, which is ERA 1 and NC Pro 1, which totaled 12.7 million. So we have about $8.5 million left to be paid out. I know we have millions that have been requested. There are 616 cases right now that are in progress, new or unreviewed. So there's still a lot of cases out there that we're having to sort through. Because of that, Yardy has requested to increase their number of staff to help Johnston County. They had 7. They requested an additional 9, and Rick and I, had individual conversations, and I think that, from our talks with you all is that we wanted to go ahead and do what we needed to do, and so we could get this money out as quick as possible. Citizens in need, so we'll go from 7 to 16. Starting the last week of December, they have to hire and train those people to be able to effectively help in what we need here in Johnston County. I'm just going to give you a quick update as to there's certain percentages we're allowed for administration to be able to pay through the grant. Anything that goes over the administrative allowable costs will have to come out of the general fund. And so for the first two buckets, 10% is allowed from ERA 1, 5% is allowed for NC Pro 1 administration. That number totals based on the 12.7 million that we have available for those first two buckets, around 953,000 that we can spend for Yardy. So far to date, we've paid Yardy around 375,000. So we have about 600,000 left to go. As you know, when Yardy adds the additional 9, that'll be 160,000 a month. We'll look at that monthly to determine if the payouts and the work being done by them and by our staff, both at DSS and finance staff. If that goes down and the numbers still look good, we'll continue to use them, but as those numbers go down, we'll call that back, and we'll call some of those employees back and let those resources be sent to other places there at Yardy, so we won't have to pay out as much. So we'll continue to monitor it, call it back as needed, and work with them as much as we can. Continue to do that to get our citizens served. There's a big need out there, and we're trying to get this money out as quick as possible.
Mr. Mclamb, in regard to accountability in the program, an example, if the landlord chose not to participate, but the tenant did, and they paid directly to the tenant, are you requiring any documentation to show that they paid that or not?
Based on the rules, we document that we have tried to call the landlord and get the landlord to be on that case. If that is not, we pay the tenant. At that point, once it's paid, that in fact becomes between the landlord and tenant, and we don't have any recourse as to what happens once the tenant receives the money.
So if they don't pay, they don't pay.
That's unless I'm thinking about something that's not there. I think that's how the rules go. Yeah, that's a concern. But from our standpoint, trying to document, we give 5 days of continuous calls, emails, texts, and what we have available to contact the landlord if the landlord doesn't respond. And sometimes the landlords don't respond for personal reasons. And at that point, we have no recourse but to send it to the tenant, because our goal is to not have that tenant evicted. And but if they choose not to pay the landlord, I don't think there's anything that we can do about that.
Does the landlord have recourse at this point? I can't remember what the rules are.
Yeah, I mean, the landlord can evict and can seek
Okay.
damages, from the tenant, obviously,
Right.
yes,
I think you'd have a pretty strong case
absolutely. I
if
mean,
you could prove that they have received money
we have that
from a
documented.
program.
Yes, we have that documented, yes. We have everybody that's been paid, whether it's rental assistance, utilities. Somebody could choose not to pay their utility bill. I think we send that directly to the utility company, though. So, but as far as the tenant goes, yeah, that's something that could happen.
Well, one more question is the responsibility of DSS, they're managing the program. Is any needy people here on ground in Johnston County, or how does that work?
We do have, they have different programs at DSS, but this one is geared specifically to emergency rental assistance. A lot of it goes through DSS, and DSS is doing a lot of work along with our finance staff to get this turned over as quick as possible. We still get a lot of phone calls and assistance that we have to provide both through DSS and through finance.
Okay, thank you for your answers, sir.
Yeah, yes, sir.
Any other questions? If not, Mr. Mclamb, thank you.
Thank you.
And now gets to the public comment portion of our meeting. Any member of the audience is welcome to come and speak for about 3 minutes on an item that is not on the agenda. So if there's anyone present, if you would come forward, state your name and your general area that you live. Mr. Taylor, come on up.
Thank you.
It's good to see you.
Good to see you, Commissioners. Mr. Braswell, you'll see that I come up here and stir something up about every meeting I can. San Mateo, Clayton, I'm in the phone book, if anybody's looking for me.
Yeah, stir up is a strong word.
I'd like to thank Dr. Pearson and her staff. My wife and I went by last Monday for our boosters, and our regular provider was booked up weeks out to get an appointment, and that was walk-in, and we were through there in a very short time. The National Guard was there helping push the paperwork, which has got to be done. And they're all very, very polite, friendly, and helpful. The actual shot took about 30 seconds, but of course the job's not through until the paperwork's done. I want to comment on something that's on the agenda, but it's not a public discussion. That's the ordinances that are being updated in accordance with the penalty, the state penalty regulation that Ms. Luster discussed at the last meeting. Anytime something attracts my attention to the ordinances, I'll go and read them. It's always interesting. The one I have concern with is the numbering of houses. They sent out by email the description, the technical description of how the numbers are supposed to appear on the house. It's confusing, to say the best. And driving down here this morning, at least out in the county, there's not a lot of houses that are in compliance that I can tell, from what I can figure out of that ordinance. I would ask two things of the board. One, get the stakeholders together. I assume it's emergency services to a large degree. Our first responders are going to be taught when they go to a home, look around the front door for the number, make sure it's the right place. See if we can't clean it up, have some simple sentences that are understandable in what we really want. We want the numbers around the front door, I think is what we're trying to say. And second, do we really want that to be a criminal offense if you number your house on the corner post of your front porch because it's more visible from the street, but it's more than 3 feet away from the door? Something says notice of violation, the homeowner has 15 days to resolve that or face a $100 fine. I think that would convince most people to go to Lowe's or Walmart and get the little 59-cent stick-on numbers and put them up on the front of their house. I don't think that needs to go through the misdemeanor process. You know, that's what I have to say. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, and always thank you for your thoroughness on your review of things for us.
I spent 6.5 years in the nuclear Navy and then worked in the commercial nuclear industry, and we're very procedure-oriented, verbatim compliance with procedures. So if it's written, I'm going to read it and try to understand it. Now, if the National Guard had been given a shot, for those that are in the military, remember the guns, they could do even more than the health department. But I don't know how well that would go across as marching down the line and getting you shot. Thank you.
Thank you. And Madam Clerk, are there any other emails? I know Mr. Taylor had sent one. Okay. All right. With that, I'll ask Neil Davis, the Executive Director for Community and Senior Services, and Jay Katz to step forward. He will give us an update, and there's no action required. It's just for information purposes only. Good morning, Mr. Davis.
Good morning. Good morning. I was asked to come here and give an update on the Johnston County area transit system, what our operations currently look like. And before I begin, I thought I would back up. Many years ago, various agencies around the county that needed to provide transportation for their constituents, each would have their own vehicles to do that. So it may be DSS or the Health Department or Council on Aging and whatever. The Department of Transportation made a decision way back to form a coordinated model in North Carolina where all of those requirements for transportation would be provided by one provider. And that way you get some economies of scale and simplify the operations, and it is a lot more efficient. So at that time, the Community Transportation Program was formed in North Carolina. And the responsibility for that program was assigned to what was then Council on Aging. Of course, now we're known as Community and Senior Services. So JCATS has operated as a paratransit service here in Johnston County, primarily to do the work that was being subdivided amongst each individual agency that we now serve. As the county becomes more and more urbanized, the question becomes, how do we adapt the program to work within those that changing environment? So just a little bit about the facts. The paratransit program here in Johnston County, we currently have 32 vehicles in our fleet. and we'll average in the neighborhood of 300 to 350 rides a day. And what we're doing is taking folks to appointments or other destinations that are being provided. JCATS will run upwards of 1 million miles a year if you take all the miles and add them together. And if you look at that on a breakdown, that's a trip from New York to Los Angeles every day. So that's a lot of miles, and all of that is designed to provide transportation for folks who are being in need of transportation from whether it's employment or school or medical or even household situations. And to look at our financial model, our funding model, I provided this pie chart, and it shows you all of the different programs that contribute to the operation of the community transportation system. So those programs are, and on the next page you'll see the definitions for all of these acronyms, but those programs provide the funding for their constituents that they're responsible for, and that those funds are what actually pay for JCATS to provide the service. So you can see that there's a lot of different slices to that pie, and each of those has its own requirements as to what is an eligibility requirement for each of the riders. On the next page, you'll see definitions that shows you exactly what each of those acronyms stand for. You'll notice that many of these programs are formula allocated, which means the amount of funds that are designated for transportation for those programs is a set amount, and it's generally formula driven by demographics, income, and that type of thing. So with that, JCATS has to allocate the use of those funds throughout the year to make sure that we can cover the operations as we go through from month to month. There are a couple of programs that we receive funds for that are not formula allocated. Those funds are provided under a competitive grant application process, and we've been fortunate over the last few years to receive some 5310 money that is for elderly and disabled transportation that is not automatically allocated to us, so that helped us quite a bit. The biggest slice of the pie, as you saw in the pie chart, is contract revenue, and that's where JCATS is providing services to other agencies and billing them, and those agencies have their own funding sources to pay for that transportation. So Medicaid would be the largest one of those slices in that big blue slice you see. Medicaid accounts for roughly 55% of our revenue. So it's a big portion of our operation. So looking at what the census data is leading us to is, as you already know, the Wake-Raleigh urbanized service area already reaches into the western part of Johnston County. And that's shown on this map shaded in blue. And the current area you see now is based on the 2010 census. The 2020 numbers have not been fully resolved yet, and the latest target I've seen on that is saying maybe by next spring we'll see what the impact on the urbanized service area might look like. But we certainly expect, due to the growth here in our county, that the UZA, as we call it, will move eastward and perhaps even as far as I-95, but we don't have that information just yet.
So, Mr. Davis, is there any coordination or tie-in with the Capital Area Metropolitan Planning Organization line? Is that the same line, or is it just a similar line?
Excellent question,
Okay.
Commissioner. The next slide is exactly talking about that. CAMPO is the Capital Area Metropolitan Planning Organization, which would be the agency that is responsible for looking after all of the urbanized service area, even the portion that overlaps into Johnston County. They're updating the Wake Human Services Transportation Plan as we speak, And JCAS has been a part of the Mobility Coordination Committee, which is working toward the updating of that plan. We have been involved in that discussion for the last couple of years. And where we are right now is there's a study being done to look at all of the plans that exist, whether it's rail or aviation or highway, and look at what the impacts might be within the urbanized area. So to that end, a consulting firm has been hired by Campo and is being funded by Campo to look at this and provide some recommendations going forward. So the results of that study are still a year, a little better out before we'll know what that looks like. But the good news is there's eyes looking at the situation and what that might do. I'm pleased to say that we're at the table, which is a good thing, because obviously it's important to us as to what happens there as the plans for serving the urbanized area continue. One of the things that we've talked about so far is making sure that we can connect riders to the fixed route network that already exists that serves Raleigh and the Triangle area. So how would we do that? Whether it be moving those routes into Johnston County or providing connectivity to transfer stations, say at White Oak or places like that. So those discussions are part of what our consulting folks will be looking at as to how we can better access the fixed route network that already exists in the Wake service area. But the interesting thing is, and let me go ahead to the next slide, is commuter rail figures into all of this as well. And so as we've been talking about, how do we deal with ground transportation and public transportation in the service area that is extending into Johnston County? How does commuter rail figure into that? So another one of the requirements of the current study that's being undertaken is to factor into that. Do we look at park and ride to provide service to and from a rail stop? And how does that figure into fixed route service and all of that type of thing? So JCAS is at the table as a part of those conversations as well, just to make sure that there's collaborative discussion going on as we look ahead to all of these different possibilities. The thing that I think is going to be a lot of the most interest to a lot of us is what will the UZA or the urbanized service area look like when the boundaries are rewritten or redrawn based on the 2020 census. So sometime hopefully by the summer of 2022, we'll see what that looks like. And then it'll be a question of how do you fund a public transportation program to bring fixed route service into a growing urbanized county. So JCAS is in a situation where we're looking at transitioning from historically a paratransit service into a true public transportation service. And that could be a collaboration between us and existing services that already exist, such as Go Raleigh and Go Triangle, or it may be that we do something a little more segregated from that. And, these are all part of the recommendations I think we'll see as we look at the results of the study.
Mr. Chairman, if I might interrupt you, Neil. When you look at this map, look at the blue area that you've been talking about, the feedback that this board has gotten from concerned citizens is primarily in the non-blue area. Those people that need a ride not to Raleigh or Durham, but to the grocery store, to the doctor's office locally, and not in the urbanized areas, but those rural areas. I heard on the news this morning that Wake County is deciding to set aside some COVID money today to provide in I think the northeastern part of their county or something, it might have been northwestern, for rides for people such as that. Using, I was on the board at JCAS when we came up with this community funding, and I see it's only 1%. I don't know if has any towns participated in that at all?
No, and that's a good question, Commissioner. When that idea was supported by the board.
Let me refresh some of the newer members. We came up with an idea that, when people that have contracts like with maybe Johnston County Industries or other organizations, we came up with a fund that people could participate. The Veterans Organization could come together and say, we'll put up X dollars, and any veteran that calls you, they're qualified until you use up that bucket. Smithfield, Selma, any of the towns, 4 Oaks, if they said they put up X dollars and anybody from our town calls you, needs a ride to the doctor, they become eligible. I think the county kicked in a portion of that, and when we set some criteria. But if we could get everybody participating, that may be a stopgap, and to make that work for these people. Because when we get people coming to tell us that their neighbor can't get a ride to the doctor's office or something, you remember the lady who used to come to see us on the wheelchair all the time?
I remember her well.
Yes.
Well, I think to take it a step further is that we're having more and more requests for just a public transportation system, and not necessarily to get to the doctor's office, but to be able to get to work.
Yeah.
I had a conversation with a lady, and she was trying to figure out a way. She works 2 jobs. She has no car. And so she walks from Selma to Smithfield. And it's tough on her. And then either that or she tries to come up with other alternatives. And so, a public transportation system, and I think with all the discussions we've had on the rail, that's great, but that's a lot of money and it's a long distance in the future. But in the meantime, back at home here, there's a real need to have some conversations about a public transportation system where people can utilize it for more so than just those buckets that Commissioner Godwin had outlined.
Well, that is true, and public demand will certainly drive, the priorities of how do we get there. But back to the community-funded program that Commissioner Godwin referred to, one of the issues that we ran into, and let's just pick a group that says, how do I know that if I contribute money to your program that it's being used specifically for my constituents? And so we came up with a way of being able to document and report that specifically on a ride-by-ride basis so that we could account for exactly how those dollars were used. And we do that with the county portion that this board approved, and every year we will give the county manager a report on how we've used those funds, and it's broken down very detailed, and we can do that for any group that wanted to put some funds toward transportation, whether it be a town or any other, group of people. It could be a church. We can assure them that those dollars that they put into the program are only being used for their constituents. As far as general public transportation goes, that's a funding issue. How do we fund that? And certainly we anticipate that the requirements for that will continue to increase. But the thing about the urbanization, if you will, of Johnston County is there's some federal money that comes into play on some of this. And it would seem to me that a collaboration between counties would be involved to look at how do we join together to make sure those monies get put all the way across the UZA and not just in one county. So that would be a natural conversation as we look toward, trying to access federal funding for public programs that obviously will require additional funding from what we are currently able to get.
Sounds like the time is now to start having a conversation, building a roadmap of how to get us to where we have a public transportation system. And it may be 2 years down the road, or it may be 5 years down the road, but I think we need to have those conversations.
Well, the good news is, and the way I look at it, the good news is the urbanization or the population growth in Johnston County will be the motivation to get to where we need to be with that. As long as we were, simply a rural county running a paratransit service, there was no demand. But as population continues to grow and the urbanized service area continues to grow further into Johnston County, it would seem prudent that Johnston County and the other counties in the service area would need to be collaborating as to how those funds are allocated.
So if we could, Mr. Davis, I know you're close to the end, but if you would finish up, and if there are any other questions, we'll jump on there, because I think you're close to the end.
Yeah, I'm
based on number of sheets that
I was answering questions. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, so you're ready for questions? Okay, that was the end. I did have one comment. I know we're talking about commuter rail. We're also talking about bus rapid transit, which is primarily right now limited to the Clayton area, let's say northwestern part of Johnston County. As the other commissioners have mentioned, we also have a dilemma of people needing to get within Johnston County. And as we talk about public service, I know 10 years or so, you and I were having the same conversation about Clayton, and it was pointed out to me by a lady there with a son who wanted to attend JCC that there was a need for focused public transportation to get to Smithfield because the community college is there, other government services are there. But at this point in time, you can't guarantee that you can go to JCC 3 days a week. So I think working towards that overall service, as well as, I know you're talking about urbanization, but there are other folks who are going to be in the eastern part of the county that need to get these same services. So it's not just focusing on west of 95. It's got to be a comprehensive service to make sure everybody has access to it. And that goes with dollars, and that's where the challenge lies for this board and for every other board.
And there again, I refer to the pie chart because the kinds of rides you're talking about, currently we have to pull from one of those buckets to provide that ride. And so that's all we have. And when that bucket has been consumed and we're out of service. So we take whatever our allocation is for a particular sector of rides that are authorized, and we have to spread that out over 12 months. And so, we call it a burn rate. As we go through each month, we're looking at what is the demand for the ride that we have funding for, and we have to make sure that we spread it. So what can happen is someone may get a ride with us this month, and that same rider may request a ride 2 months from now and not be able to get it. And what has happened is the money, that we have allocated for that period of time has already been used up. So that makes it very aggravating for people who are, don't ever know if they're going to be able to get a ride or not. But the problem we're faced with is we've got these buckets of money that we have to operate from. So to increase the availability of rides for just anybody or any, type of service, whether it be just to run to the doctor's office or to the drugstore, where do we pull that? What bucket do we pull that from? So.
Okay. Any other questions?
Well, you continue to have a waiting list, and you folks are stressed to death. And by the way, I saw your billboard advertising for bus drivers. But
that's another conversation.
I know that's another conversation. But I know that some people get frustrated, but there's not so much money there, and you don't have so many opportunities. And I personally think y'all doing a great job with JCATS.
Well, thank you. We try really hard, and I'll say it's a tribute to staff to try and explain to folks what our limitations are. But we've been very grateful for the support from this board, as Commissioner Garvin talked about. I thought the community funded program was a great idea and would be popular, but it's turned out that, writing a check has been a little bit difficult to get folks to do, but it's there, and we can certainly provide the audit trail, for those funds if that were to be something other groups could look at. But we're here to do all we can do, and I love transportation. It's the most enjoyable thing I do, to be honest with you. A lot of moving parts, but the collaboration amongst agencies, and now I think the collaboration between counties as we look at the broader picture of public transportation, there's a lot of synergy and a lot of potential there. So, I think we all need to be mindful of the opportunity to continue that dialogue.
Where are we on the new building?
Where are we? I got a call Friday, Commissioner Godwin. We, in 2017, began a program to determine what we needed in terms of a facility. You were there at the time. In 2019, we were awarded a federal grant to construct a building. And in 2021, we were finding out that we might actually be able to start on it.
Good.
And so my goal is to live long enough to break ground, which I'm hoping will be in the early part of 2022.
Great.
So thank you for helping us
Yeah.
with that.
It's needed.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, Mr. Davis, thank you for
All right.
the update.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And the next item on the agenda is Parks, Greenways, and Open Space. Adrian O'Neill will give us some information on the master plan for the Booker Track and Old Cleveland School site. Adrian, good morning.
Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you for having me today. What I wanted to come up and do today was ask for approval to advertise for RFQ, or a request for quotations, or qualifications, excuse me, for a design team to do a master plan for the property that we bought a year ago now, a little more than a year ago, at the corner of Matthews and Polenta, and then the old Cleveland School gym site in ball fields. Right now, GCAA is managing those ball fields for us, but we think that the two components together as a complex will work a little bit better, and we want to make sure we've got a nice First County Park there when we get done. So we're looking to put that out, and hope, with your approval, to be able to advertise in January, get those qualifications back between January and March, and then come back and talk about funding for the plan maybe in right after the April meeting.
We need a motion.
I was going to say, yeah, we need a motion.
I'll make that motion that we approve Mr. O'Neill's request.
I'll second.
All right, there's been a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. O'Neill.
Sooner rather than later.
We're getting there.
Okay.
All right, I think next up for the next few items, Chandra Farmer, our Public Utility Director, has for us. We're going to start out with the grant award and budget revision for the 210 wastewater treatment facility, Biosolids.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
On November the 4th, we bid the Biosolids Facilities Project. This, as you will recall, is a component of our 210 wastewater treatment facility project. We did the treatment project last month. Well, it was awarded last month, and we did the Biosolids this month. And then the third project that will go with this is our effluent line, our discharge line. And that will be bid later in 2022, well, probably spring to summer of 2022. We received 3 bids for the Biosolids project. The low bidder was from Wharton Smith Incorporated of Charlotte, North Carolina, in the amount of $25,097,000. And you can see before you a proposed project budget. As you'll recall, last month we updated the project budget to include, of course, based on the bids that we had received for the treatment project, the 210 treatment facility project. We also included in that budget last month all of our technical services for the 210 project and the Biosolids project, and some other components that were already in the project budget. We have, as you'll recall, we have already accepted a loan for just over $83 million for the project, and that's 1.1% for 20 years. As I mentioned last month, our intent is, after the meeting today, assuming the budget is approved, we will send a letter to the state requesting an increase in that loan amount, which they have done in the past, of 10%. That's kind of a standard item they've done and allow us to do without having to go back to LGC. So the proposed revised project budget includes an assumption that we'll be able to receive that increased loan amount, and it includes an appropriation from our ARPA funding. It's a $16 million appropriation. And as I discussed last month, we have learned from the state that they are going to have a round of funding in April. The deadline will be April 30th of 2022, where they will have additional ARPA funds available for, and we intend to apply for those in April 22. In the meantime, we would appropriate from our county ARPA funds the $16 million. Then if we're able to receive anything from the state program, we can save the county funds for other projects that we have coming up, or reduce them in that amount. Now, of course, we will still have, as I said, we still will have to bid the effluent project to be in this capital project. So we will come back with another budget revision once we bid that project and we know what ARPA funding, additional ARPA funding we may get from the state in those grant funds. We're recommending today, though, award of the Biosolids facilities project to Wharton Smith in the amount of $25,097,000, approval of the revised project budget, the capital project ordinance, and award resolution contingent upon funding agency approval. And I'll be
Make a
happy to
motion, we approve that.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. Any other discussion?
Yeah, I've got a question. The nitrogen acquisition, is that an issue? I mean, is that a done deal? You don't?
That particular one is a done deal. That is closed out. We acquired that additional nitrogen, those pounds from Phillips Plating Company.
Okay.
And when were you anticipating the transmission line being able to be bid?
Late spring to summer. We would like to kind of hold, the design is 90% completed. We're finalizing some easements, final permitting, but we would like to hold that till we know about the additional ARPA funding that we might be available for us.
Any other discussion? All right, there's been a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. And we'll go on to the agreement approval for the Highway 96 Four Oaks Economic Development Project. Ms. Farmer?
Okay. I would like to point out there's an error in the memo that you have before you. On September 8, 2020, the county and the town of Four Oaks executed an agreement related to Broad River Retail LLC. This is water and sewer infrastructure to serve this economic development area. And in that agreement, the town is responsible for the sewer facilities necessary and for the adoption of the sewer budget. The county is responsible for the water portion, and we've adopted a budget for the water portion of the project. You may recall this project includes $3 million in grants that we agreed to divide equally between the town of Four Oaks and the county. The agreement is that we'll divide the grants and the expenses. And the town of Four Oaks they're a little bit ahead of the county. They have bid their water project. They have awarded that to J.F. Wilkerson Contracting. Our project, the sewer project, is design's completed. We have that out for permitting right now. We anticipating be able to advertise our project for construction in the next 30 to 60 days. But in the meantime, the grant funding requires the county to sign the town of Four Oaks' agreement with J.F. Wilkerson as a co-signer because we are dividing that grant money. They'll have to do the same on our sewer agreement. We're recommending approval of that agreement, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
When you say sewer, you're speaking, the J.F. Wilkerson got a job for the pump station and most of the collection lines, as I understand it. What other sewer is there for that area?
It was just the gravity line, the pump station, and a force mains. All that was in their project. That's in the town's project.
Right, okay.
And the town will own, operate, and maintain the sewer portion.
Right.
Mr. Chairman, I move for approval.
I second it.
All right, there's been a motion and a second. Any other discussion?
We've got some new personalities on their board. I don't anticipate any problem with them signing our side, I presume.
True.
All right.
All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. All right, Mr. Farmer, I think your final, almost final item is the bulk water agreement between City of Raleigh and Johnston County.
The county, we currently have 2 interconnections with the city of Raleigh to purchase water on an emergency basis. We've been working with the city to allow for a routine, regular purchase. They have agreed to sell us up to 2.5 million gallons a day. These would be available at our US 70 interconnect and at our Hollybrook Road interconnect. The county would have, the contract does have a minimum purchase requirement of it of 300,000 gallons a day. This is to keep water quality, maintain the water quality at these interconnects. We will pay, the agreement requires the county to pay our capacity fees, and in the past, you may recall, typically we pay all of our capacity fees up front and buy that capacity, but the city would like for us to pay these on a monthly basis, and the reason behind this is that this is somewhat of a short-term contract. It's a 10-year contract, so we would pay those fees for the duration of the contract for as long as we maintain this contract. Then, and there's also on here the initial monthly commodity charge is $1.52 per CCF, which is actually $2.03 per 1,000 gallons, which we typically talk about our rates in per 1,000 gallons. And then the agreement term, like I said, is 10 years. We do have 3 years if we can renew it, but it will have an increased rate if we choose to extend the contract. The city of Raleigh and Johnston County realize this is not intended to be a long term. This is for 10 years, as I said. And we're working on our long-term water supply plan, and this will allow us additional time to put our additional permanent long-term supplies in place.
Any questions, Ms. Farmer? Do I hear a motion to approve the agreement?
I'll make a motion to approve the agreement.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Next, I'll ask our counsel, Ms. Jennifer Slutzer, to come up and discuss an ordinance update for us, and I think it's one that Mr. Taylor had referenced earlier.
Yes, sir, it is. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board.
Morning. Good morning.
I appreciate the opportunity to be with you this morning. Wanted to bring back for your consideration some proposed revisions to the Johnston County Code of Ordinances. The purpose of these revisions were to be compliant with Session Law 2021-138 as it pertains to decriminalizing certain local government ordinances. I presented these proposed revisions to you at your last meeting and respectfully request that you take action on these today. As we talked about last time, these proposed revisions do nothing more than maintain the status quo. It was not a complete review or rewrite of the Johnston County ordinances, and so all we are doing with these proposed revisions is maintaining the status quo. Certainly, it is up to you as to whether or not you want to continue to enforce these proposed rules criminally or not. I did have the opportunity, and this was actually prior to even presenting these to you, to meet with the stakeholders that are involved in enforcing these ordinances and talk about whether or not they recommended that we continue to do that. And with regards to the addressing ordinance, I did talk with both Brett Renfro and Kevin Hubbard about those proposed revisions as well as with Sheriff Bizzle. And the basis for that being leaving that as a criminal remedy is that as we have continued development in Johnston County, the intent is to make sure that those folks that are doing that development for public health, safety, and welfare get those addresses on those residences. So if there is an emergency response that is necessary, that our first responders and our other teams can find these residences. Again, that was the basis of that. Sometimes we find in enforcing our rules that a visit from the sheriff can get someone to respond a little quicker than a letter from me. But that is the basis for that particular ordinance remaining enforceable by criminal penalty. Certainly with regards to some of the other issues that were brought up, whether it be one in which, it's the ordinance is poorly written in parts, or changes proposed to the firearms discharge ordinance. We did not review any of those technical pieces. All we reviewed was the sections relating to misdemeanor violations and making those compliant with that new session law. Certainly, as we go through things for quality assurance purposes, we make updates to ordinances from time to time and do complete and comprehensive reviews. That was not what was done with these particular ordinances. Again, it was merely to maintain the status quo. But I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
I realize this is not the issue you're dealing with, but Mr. Taylor's example raises a question with me. You mean if I don't put up a prescribed numbers on my house, I can be criminally held responsible?
Yes, that is the answer to the question. I will tell you what Sheriff Bizzle says on a very regular basis, we practice a common sense approach to law enforcement. And if you look at the ordinance, there are, before you're criminally charged, there's a whole process that you would go through. You would have ample opportunity in which to get it right. And again, we rarely enforce our ordinances criminally, but it is nice in some cases to have the opportunity to do that when it's necessary.
Mr. Chairman, I really like our sheriff. He's a great sheriff, but he ain't gonna live forever. And I think it's a rule, really a rule that when you pass a law, you need to assume that the law is going to be enforced. You can't assume there's going to be common sense by the person enforcing the law. And I agree with Commissioner Godwin. At least I think that's what he's trying to say.
Yeah.
That's a pretty serious thing to charge someone with a criminal offense just because they don't have their address on the right place on their porch. I think whatever civil fine we want to make, charge them $1,000, charge them $2,000. Yeah, if we need to get their attention, but I don't think we should be charging these folks with a criminal offense.
Mr. Chairman, the problem would have to lie in existing homes, because the current approval for COs for all new construction, be it commercial or residential, one of the checklist items is it must have the display of the address on the building itself. And that's very much adhered to on all new construction. So the problem would lie in existing homes that have fell through the cracks over the years, or maybe you've had a deterioration and their numbers have faded or whatever, but I think the problem's going to be mostly in existing addresses.
One of the things I see is when you have 4 or 5 mailboxes in a row, and from existing, and they all got a number on it, so you don't know which number, where goes where. It might be, it might be a place where they have their collection on, like they used to do in the old days, on the street, but now with new construction, there is a collection site for mail, but I can see where that would be confusing if you were trying to, if emergency services was trying to respond to a house, and then maybe because the post office ordered them to be that close together, I can see a problem there.
And certainly, I think as both Mr. Godwin and Mr. Smith were alluding to, certainly if you choose not to have this enforced as a criminal penalty, there are other enforcement options that are available. And so certainly we will still be able to enforce the ordinance, just not through a misdemeanor process, which frankly was the whole point in, I think, the legislature's decriminalization process, is that they wanted boards to come and take a look at their ordinances to see if they wanted to continue to have the enforcement capability through the misdemeanor process. And so if this board decides that they would prefer not to include that portion, then you can certainly do that. And what we would ask is that if that's the part that you want to take out, just allow that to reflect in your motion, if you're good with the rest of the
Mr. Chairman, I've heard what my fellow commissioners said, but let me ask you a question on this, Ms. Slusher. So if I own 10 rental houses and I don't put the addresses for the rental houses, I mean, has this got something to do with protection as far as older construction, rental houses? I mean, and I get what you're saying about the criminal charge, but I mean, if you find somebody $3,000 a house,
I'm not even in favor of fining.
Yeah, I mean,
What happened to freedom and liberty? I mean, I don't have, now, in the case of a landlord, I can see where you've got some liability and you've got
I mean, how do you
responsibility.
separate the protection versus the,
Yeah. In my
freedom
house, if I don't
aspect?
put up a number, I'm at risk, but that's my choice. It ought to be my choice.
Ms.
We
Slugger,
just made a pledge for freedom.
you've been here for some time. Have you ever went to court over a criminal charge of a address posting?
No, sir, I've not, and that would be enforced by the sheriff and the district attorney's office. Typically, the way that we handle our enforcement of ordinance violations is to do them civilly, and then I would handle those, and we would go to court and get injunctive relief, or whatever is required to take care of the issue. I did ask both Mr. Renfro and Mr. Hubbard if they could recall a time in which that ordinance had been enforced criminally, and neither of them could. So, again, we just maintain the status quo of the ordinances as they were written. If you would like to do something different, absolutely,
So is this
resorted
something we
to.
could pull the street address numbering out, approve the other changes? I haven't heard any discussion on those.
Yes, sir.
And you could bring back an alternate.
Yeah, I would make a motion that we pull the one dealing with the street addresses off,
And that would be paragraph 11.
and paragraph 11, and approve all the other changes, and have staff come back with a recommendation as to a proper penalty.
I'd most second that motion.
All right, there's been a motion and a second. Any other discussion?
Yeah, I would say that when you take a look at that, and obviously, you know, from coming from a life that I supervised that response to those people at 3 a.m., when you've got to call back the property owner and have them go out there and start flashing their porch light because EMS can't find them, and their loved one is laying there dying in the floor, it's really important. And if you don't put your address numbers on there, you're endangering every person that lives in that house, whether it's your children or anybody else. Now, I know that sounds very elementary, and I'm all about freedoms too, but that's a real problem. And the North Carolina Fire Code addresses it for commercial buildings, and our building inspection department, as Commissioner Braswell said, enforces that for new construction. But it is the older homes that are sitting back off a path somewhere. And I'll interject this part as well. Back when we ran 300 or 400 calls a year, you knew who lived where. You knew Aunt Bessie and her cousin and all those folks. They lived back there at the end of the path. It's a different world now. We're running thousands of calls a year. And these people that come in here that are running EMS, they don't know all these people, and they move around the districts. And so it's vitally important to have that. So I'm going to say that and I agree with your motion. I think that's a great approach.
Let me respond to that. I think we would all agree that there needs to be proper enforcement. We all agree that we need for fire and safety and EMS to properly identify residences. I don't think there's any dispute with that.
Right.
But it's a big difference in a civil penalty and a criminal penalty. For a criminal penalty, we generally, I think the law requires there to be intent for a criminal penalty. That's part of a crime, is you intended to commit that crime. Whereas a civil penalty is more akin to whether you intended or didn't intend, you did something that you need to be penalized for. And I think we're better off with it, and this is fit better with a civil penalty.
Yep.
Any other discussion? We have a motion and a second. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. And Ms. Lusser, you are up again to discuss Commissioner redistricting. Yeah,
Yes.
I can say that.
So we've talked about this a couple times, and I don't know that I've had the opportunity to stand before you and give more of a comprehensive answer to the question. I think the times that we've talked about it before has been more of a question during a board meeting and not an actual sort of conversation about all of the rules at one time. We've sort of just answered questions as they came up. But at your last meeting, you asked me to take a look at Johnston County's method of electing its members to the Board of Commissioners. And number one, to determine whether Johnston County is required to redistrict to account for population imbalances, and then number 2, what are those available options to you if the Board of Commissioners decided to do that. So in Johnston County, for the public, I just sort of wanted to explain that in Johnston County, the Board of Commissioners is comprised of commissioners from 7 districts. These commissioners are elected from each district, and they have to reside in the district, but the election of the Board of County Commissioners is conducted countywide. So in other words, all residents of the counties nominate and elect each member of the Board of Commissioners. And because of that, Johnston County does not have to redistrict because it does not have true electoral districts. And only counties with those true electoral districts are the ones that are subject to those statutory and constitutional requirements of redistricting. As we talked about, those true electoral districts are the type of districts in which only the voters of that particular district can nominate and elect a particular candidate. And that is not what we have here in Johnston County. Because we allow our qualified voters of the entire county to nominate and elect each of the members of the board, we don't need to be concerned about the one person, one vote obligation to redistrict because everybody's elected countywide. The one person, one vote principle protects the right of voters to have equal weight. Since Johnston County voters are able to vote for all Board of County Commissioner candidates, their votes are weighted equally, and the one person, one vote does not mandate redistricting based on population discrepancies. Also, speaking with that, generally, you don't have the authority to redistrict absent some legal mechanism that allows you to do that. If the Board of Commissioners desire to redistrict its residency districts, there are 2 options. Number 1 is to seek local legislation or to get a local bill. Or number 2, move to a system of electoral districts rather than residency districts. If the Board of Commissioners desired to revise its residency district boundaries, it could seek local legislation from the General Assembly in order to do that, the specifics of which would be up to the legislature. If the Board of Commissioners desire to change its election method from residency districts to true electoral districts, there is a statute that allows for that, and you could alter your election method by resolution and approval by the voters through a referendum. So it would be required that the citizens of Johnston County vote to alter that particular structure. I can go into greater detail about all of those things if you would like, but that's sort of a 30,000-foot view as to the redistricting question. And I think part of it came up because we saw some of our neighbors around the state going through the redistricting process. And when the census numbers came out, looking at Johnston County, certainly our numbers grew. And so the question came up as to whether or not Johnston County was required to redistrict. And then the question came up, well, if we wanted to, could we? And so hopefully I've given you the answers to those 2 questions, and I'd be happy to answer any additional questions that you might have.
I would just like to say thank you. I know that a lot of those questions came from me because being kind of new to this game, I just assumed we got a census, we do something different. And thanks for your research and constantly telling me the same thing so it got through my thick head that, okay, we are doing things the way that we're supposed to do them. And I know there's some discussions on the board, but I know we have time going forward to look at that and see if there's any changes at all that we want to make. But with that, any other?
I have one question, Mr. Chairman. You said something about if it would depend on some enabling legislation, and they would stipulate the details. Would that be based on our recommended or our approach to it to say, here's what we recommend, here's what we'd like to do?
That's typically the way that the process works. Certainly at the end of the day, you don't always get all of the choices, but certainly that's typically the way that it would work. And there are other counties in which have moved through that process and gotten local bills to allow them to redistrict from residency districts. And let me see if I have in my notes which one. Wake, Henderson, and Moore County all have that authority.
Mr. Chairman, I don't think this is the time to get into weeds on this stuff, but it's good to know. I personally like the way we do it in our county, but I can see where it might be best if we restructure some of the size of the districts, if nothing else, just because of the residency requirement.
Right. I agree with that. And I know there's been groups who've asked each of us and have come to the meeting, so hopefully they will get a chance to see this and understand, where we are and the fact that we are doing what we're supposed to do. So I think we'll take it under advisement. If we have any other questions, we will come to you at a later time.
Mr. Chairman, I think a good way to look at this is the difference between the House of Representatives and the difference of the Senate. When we have the House of Representatives, like we have 14 districts, we always get into the one vote, one person redistricting, because that representative represents the people in that district and is elected by the people in that district. We never have redistricting to elect a senator. Senators represent the whole state and are elected by the whole state. So there's never a redistricting for a senator. And what we really have is all the citizens of Johnston County elect, quote, 7 senators, which is what we are because they all vote for us. And we have to be elected by everyone. And and the quirk in that is you have to reside in a district, but you still are elected by all the citizens of Johnston County. And that's what takes it out of the redistricting requirement.
That's a good point.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. And now I ask Mr. Chad Mclamb to come forward once again and discuss budget revisions.
Mr. Mclamb, you do a great job on budget revisions, but I move that we adopt the budget revision.
Second.
Great. Sorry I asked you to get up.
That's all right. Good talk.
There's been a motion and a second to approve. I don't think there's any other discussion. All in favor?
Thank you, great job, sir.
I was going to ask if there's anything we need to discuss about this, Chad.
I think we've had some discussion about moving the budget revisions to the consent agenda, and then people, if they want to, could pull one off.
Yes.
Therefore, we would be taken care of in the consent agenda. Do we need to take that action, or how?
You don't have to. We can just put it on the consent agenda if that's the general consensus of the board.
Yeah, and I think I've talked with most of you about that, but if we move this to the consent, if there is an item that we need pulled off for further discussion.
Either that or if it's such an unusual item that he could.
That's right.
I'm
Deem
available
it a separate.
anytime y'all need to
Yeah,
talk.
so going forward, I think we will put
I think it's a good
things on
idea.
consent and pull them off or discuss as needed. Yes.
I enjoyed the discussion.
You see, get on the camera again. And so along those lines, as we discuss appointments, I think the recommendation, at least from the chair, is we will do for those appointments that are, basically you have just enough candidates or even too few candidates to fill the positions, we will do the same thing. If there's specific candidates or something we need to pull off to discuss, we will do that. And for all the ones where we have more candidates or applicants for a position, we will do what we have been doing and we're going to do today is we will have a vote at our morning meeting and then we'll announce that at our evening meeting. So with that, we'll go the old route today, but we have looks like 3 appointments that we have enough people or the right number of candidates for the positions. There's a motion to approve those A through C.
Mr. Chairman, so moved to approve the appointments as listed for items A through C, along with the Economic Development Board appointments representing Four Oaks and Smithfield, and grant necessary waivers where needed.
Second.
Any other discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
And so we do have 4 applicants for the Economic Development Board. We have Ed Aldridge, Steve Hargis, Richie Brady, and April Stevens, and there's a ballot at each one of your seats. So if you would complete those and turn those into the clerk, we will announce the 2 board members at our evening meeting. And on to the Delinquent Tax Report. Ms. Andrews? Good morning.
Good morning, Commissioner. Congratulations, Mr. Chairman.
Thank
Vice
you.
Chairman, and
Thank you.
welcome, Commissioner Brazel. As always, if the tax office can do anything to assist you in any way or help you with any of this information, feel free to reach out.
Thank you, ma'am.
Before you, very briefly, you have the October collections report. As you can see, we're up 4.35% in collections over the same period for last year. And registered motor vehicle VTS collections are also up slightly over the same period of last year. However, I will say, as preliminary numbers are coming in from November, it appears that things are slowing down just a tad. So as we go forward in the next few days, this is where we begin our very busy time in the tax office. We are anticipating mailing our listing forms to all citizens and businesses in Johnston County around the 30th of December. And then January 5th, which is will be a couple days after our next early January meeting, will be the last day to timely pay 2021 property taxes. I'll be happy to pay them.
When you said things are slowing down, that was in reference to motor vehicles?
Registered motor vehicles only, yes,
Okay,
sir.
thank you.
I promise you, things are not slowing down on the real estate side of the county. That is, we are extremely busy, which is a great thing.
Miss Andrews,
Yes, sir.
forgive me for getting older, but could you remind me of when the next reval is?
Yes, it is. No, I have to. In fact, that's interesting you said it, because I was sitting back there doing the computation when they were talking about going to RFQ, because I'm like, uh-oh, we're getting ready to go there. The next one is scheduled for 2025, and because that was, had been 6, right? We had been 8 years, and now you voted for 6, so 2025 is the next one, and then it'll be 4 years every time thereafter, unless y'all choose to change that.
Right.
To 2025. As it stands.
I'm sorry.
No,
Thank
do
you.
not apologize.
Any other questions for Ms. Andrews?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we'll have Rick Hester, Manager's Report and comments.
Congratulations, Chairman Lauder, Vice Chairman Harris. Look forward to working with you, Mr. Brazel.
Thank you.
Yes, just one thing. You know, the Heritage Center is right here in town at the old former First Citizens Bank. I think that was donated to the county and the Heritage Center 25 years ago or so. And Mr. Todd Johnston, the executive director there, is here with us today. But after the agenda was really put together, he had asked me, because obviously with COVID, their fundraising is down quite a bit. They are funded by a combination of a county appropriation at budget time and fundraising. That's the primary. The fundraising has been down quite a bit. So his request was for a one-time $20,000 from the county to assist with their upfitting for their, they're going to be in the former Roses building now with some of their displays, and to kind of upfit the things that they have in there. And I told him I would certainly bring it to the board, and I would recommend that one-time appropriation from existing funds. And Mr. Johnson's here if you have any specific questions.
Is there any flexibility in any of the federal funds that we've received for something like this, since it is COVID related?
I'm not sure. I haven't checked, but it may be a stretch.
Okay, I got you.
Mr. Chairman, I'm familiar with a lot of what the Heritage Commission does, and I think it's very informative, and I so move we do a one-time funding mechanism for $20,000 to help them upfit their new location.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion?
And I will say, this is for their displays. this would go with the building. It wouldn't stay with the building once, if they have to leave.
All right, all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
All right, board comments and reports. We'll start with Mr. Smith. Like it's going to go quick. So
I've got some things. I'll ask Mr. Hester, maybe I should have asked during his time, but it has to do, well, you remember the formula we created for helping the towns. I know we helped Princeton a while back with some stormwater problems. I've talked with some municipalities that have some similar circumstance, and they just need to pursue it from staff basis to be in touch with our staff.
That request for qualifications to the towns, the board committed $5.5 million,
Right.
which averages $500,000 per town. And so that was sent out to the towns. It's been probably 2 or 3 weeks ago. I did have one town manager that is fairly new, and he had not received his, so we got that to him last week. I don't think we've received any proposals yet, but the proposals aren't due until the summer. So
Okay.
we do anticipate some of those. And you're right, it was, the board said for infrastructure-related type projects, ones that would also qualify for some of the federal funding as well. But the $5.5 million from the county is all general fund.
Okay, all right. That's all I have,
We'll
Mr.
keep you
Chairman.
posted on that too.
Mr. Chairman, I've got just one thing for DSS. The current budget that we adopted back in June of this past year included some positions to assist in operation of our Department of Social Services. Of those positions, 4 of them were held back just to give an opportunity to get the others in place and get them working, and with the understanding that they would come back probably in January if those positions were still needed, and we would move forward with those. There's no action required. I just want to make the board aware and to make sure that there's no issues or concerns. But we would like to go ahead and move forward with those additional 4 positions that were already approved in the current budget that we're in. And Mr. Sabatino is here if you have any specific questions. They've converted the last of the meeting spaces in Building 3 to make some makeshift office areas to have a place for these folks to work. But it's pretty critical that we get these positions filled. If there's any issues with the board, I'll try to answer any questions.
do we need to have a vote on that or just consensus of the board?
I think it would be helpful if you did have a vote, since the budget didn't reflect the funding for those
You'll make a
particular
motion.
positions.
I'll make that in the form of a motion.
I'll second.
Thank you, sir.
All right, any other discussion?
I remember that discussion. But-
All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. And now I think there is a need to go into closed session, so is there a motion to?
Yeah, I move the board go into closed session for the purpose of consulting with an attorney employed by the board in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege pursuant to NCGS 143-318-11A3, discuss matters relating to the location or expansion of industries or other businesses in the area pursuant to NCGS 143-318-11A4, to establish or instruct staff concerning the negotiation of the price and terms of a contract concerning the acquisition of real property pursuant to NCGS 143-318-11A5, and for the purpose of personnel pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 143-318-11A6.
Second.
All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
And Counselor, do I need to, well, there won't be any action taken after this for the folks at the press that maybe listen? Okay,
I don't anticipate any.
okay. And now do we need a motion to go into closed session, or was that good enough?
We did.
All right, cool. Boy, I didn't-
Now we're in closed session.
I didn't know what that meant.